Good afternoon, traders. This is Christian Farmer at StrawBucket Trade Group, and this is your end of day market recap for Halloween, the end of October, and hope you're having a great holiday and doing something spooky. The markets were not really that spooky today after you could see the performance as we kind of wrap up for the month, down 2% for SPY, 2.2%. Qs were down about the same, a little bit over 2%. Small caps were down 5.3%. Sorry, that's the mid caps were down 5.3%. The small caps were spooky, scary. For the month of October, they were down 6.9%. Interesting when you look at some of these funds too, and perhaps I'll go through a couple sectors here. We'll talk about the month performance. But the ARK Innovation Fund finished down 11.6% for the month. The IBD 50 ETF finished down about 7%. I suddenly feel a little bit better about my month, which did not finish positive for the month. And I will send out a P&L video to members just after this video. But we had a positive note here. SPY was up 60 for the day. SPY up 60 basis points for the day. And the small caps actually performed quite nicely for the day. Nice little bounce here, up 1.9% and 1.3%. We'll go over all of the price action, but I did feel that, or I feel that, the small caps will be interesting to watch. Every time they've bounced a little bit, they've been unwound pretty quickly. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. And I do have some levels to watch here. Let's talk about the S&P first. Just to go over the themes of the day. Yeah, some of the most beaten up areas bounced. So just as I mentioned, the ARK Innovation ETF was down 11.5% for October, but a nice bounce today. I think that fund was up 2.3%. So, names will bounce, and they'll bounce hard when they've been sold off like they have, like that. And there's either some positive news or a positive catalyst. I thought what was interesting for the most part of the day was the move in bonds. TLT was up about 70, 80 basis points. And I thought that was really kind of giving a nice relief bounce, but I don't know if it's end of month selling. I put it out on the internet and people were asking me, what was the reason for the move? I don't know. I don't have any specific thing, but bonds sometimes move that way. And you could see how they finished for the day, really kind of a move lower. I was talking with Benzinga right at the end of the day, and I was saying that, bonds were a good thing for the day. And, stabilizing a little bit and giving a relief bounce to some areas. But we'll have to see how this works out. And I don't have a crystal ball here, but I know what that pattern looks like. So far, it looks like a bear flag. Now, I don't know if that's going to break, and I think you have to really be mindful of that. Equities, as you've probably have learned over the last month or so, or maybe a couple months, is that equities do not like bond volatility. So when yields are going higher and they're moving fast, equities kind of really freak out when that happens, right? And that's quite normal. We've seen that in a lot of different instruments, right? Even though it's not something exactly involved in equities, if it's something like the dollar or bonds, when they tend to move really fast and when volatility picks up there, right, there is sometimes that knee-jerk reaction in equities. So I think that this is a must watch here because we've been going sideways now for about a week. And you'll notice what has been taking place a little bit, right? Equities have been, have been stabilizing and have tried to bounce. So I think that's really majorly going to be determined by if bonds can hold in here, right? Earnings reports, we could talk about a couple of them, that happened after the close. I'll talk about Arista Networks, but there's been some good reports and there's been some bad reports. The issue has been that a lot of the good reports, the price action has not been able to for a lot of names have not been able to hold the up moves. Now today was different, and I was really surprised. I didn't think Pinterest was going to hold those gains today, but they did, and so did Arista Network. So let me talk about what I have in front of you. This is the U.S. dollar, which was up pretty decently today. Now there was a Bank of Japan meeting yesterday or overnight, but we're still sitting here also just like bonds in a downtrend. The dollar's in an uptrend. Right? I see a lot of people saying, "Hey, well, well, maybe it's going to break down. Well, sure, that could happen. But this held support exactly where it needed to earlier in the month, right? A consolidation above the breakout, right? And we're still sitting here with this 3017 VPOC, which I've been saying now for a week that I think that this gets taken out, but it has not been taken out, so I haven't been necessarily right about that. But I just know the direction of the trend is higher, right? And also that lines up very well with the top of value for on the weekly chart too. So that's why I just think price is going to, the longer that it hangs out around here, the more of a chance that this gets taken out. But there's certainly no breakdown. It's been honoring the trend very nicely, and that this is also a must watch. And I'm just highlighting a couple things as we're going to start a new month for November, right? And everybody's been talking about how the seasonality it gets stronger in November. Yes, it normally does, but I would really be paying attention instead of, focusing on that, which is nice to have that in the back of your mind that seasonality is stronger. But I think you have to have some things to really pay attention to other than that hope that seasonality is going to be really strong this month, because it wasn't in October, and I heard about that a lot. And then I heard people push that back, right? Oh, it's not, it doesn't necessarily start in the middle of October. It's November. It's November. Okay, that's fine. I get it. People don't want to admit they're wrong, right? And there's a lot of it is what it is what it is. I've been trading for a long time. There's a lot of immature, egotistical people in trading. They don't like to admit that they're wrong. They'll rather come up with some other narrative or some other reason, right? Why they're not wrong. So so in any event, but what I would be focused on is maybe what the direction of the dollar does and what the direction of bonds. If these two stabilize and if they hang in here, then yes, maybe we can have that stronger seasonality. All right. So let's talk about S&P future, or I'll bring up SPY. So SPY, we know we took out this VPOC. We're getting a bounce, right where I would think that we would, right? Here's the November valuary. So it doesn't look like we're going to open up the month inside value. But for now, we are inside the valuary for the week, right? So we've been making this move here, and we'll see if we can gravitate higher. Tomorrow, we've got a couple things going on. Right. So again, this is positive, right? That we're inside the valuary. But I would also note, like, zoom out a little bit, right? I would remind you to try to stay objective here. I do like that we've seen a little bit stronger breadth. I've talked about that over the weekend in the member video, that we want to see breadth really start to kind of change, because it's been atrocious over the last couple months. But so far we've kind of seen this move play out. Here was the beginning of last week, right? Really, what's been difficult is Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of the last few weeks, right? Here's 2 weeks ago, right? We hung in there for a couple days. We got rejected trying to go higher, and then we spilled lower Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. We spilled lower last week, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So here's the hard part, right? What are we going to do in here? Right. And it could be that the Fed might dictate some of that. And that's one of the things to watch for tomorrow. Also, what a lot of people are talking about for tomorrow is this budget statement. Here, let me bring up this instead here. In terms of the Treasury statement, I don't have the time for that. I think it's a couple hours before tomorrow's Fed decision, which I went over in yesterday's video. So I'm not expecting I think it's going to be a non-event tomorrow, but I'll be listening very closely. Just because I think that doesn't mean that's what's going to happen. I'll be listening very closely what Powell says once his press conference starts at 2:30. Reminder that he usually speaks for about 45 to 50 minutes, right? And then you usually have about 40 minutes of trading left after he's done. So I think it'll be very, very interesting if he actually comes out with anything material. But my prediction is that he's just going to say, hey, we're going to keep an eye on inflation. The job market continues to be strong. Some areas of inflation have been stubborn. We're not at our 2% goal, but we're getting closer, right? these are all things that he's going to dance around and say, and basically they're all things that we've heard before. What I'm regurgitating, but what I'm looking for is anything new, right? About pausing. I personally, I don't think they're going to pause interest rate hikes until they see inflation come down more. Right, we just had that PCE deflator come out on Friday, which shows that inflation is still definitely present. All right, so I'll move on. We also get ISM manufacturing, so a bunch of data points at a half hour after the open. So it's going to be, like I said, it's going to be a very interesting day for tomorrow, right? And again, so that bond. The bond, sorry, I can't think of the right term, what they're coming out with tomorrow, but I guess their schedule of what they're going to be doing in terms of financing for the Treasury, that will come out before, and that could be more important, like I said, than tomorrow's Fed meeting. All right, so that's that. Q, we'll go through just the rest of the indices, and then we'll talk about a couple single names. We'll talk about AMD after the close too. But Qs, right? We've been making a nice little move, even though this was not the outperformer for the day. Still did quite well, right? The other thing that I forgot to go over on the daily chart is I talk a lot about the 5-period moving average, right? This is actually the 5-period exponential moving average. Price has gotten above here, right? So this is a starting point. Right, we've got a little bit of confirmation. Let's see if we can stay above the 5-period moving average. Right, that's something that I'll definitely be watching. And so if you want a point, like if you put on a little bit of risk, right, and you're worried that that this is just a small move back up, use that 5-period moving average, right, to say, hey, if we lose that, right, we're starting to trend back lower again. Here's IWM. I talked about how IWM got rejected a few times yesterday at the bottom of the weekly value area. Well, it made it in today, right? And here's where we are, right? You can see a little bit of move back there. But again, it could be some month-end flows, could be a little bit of selling based on what bonds are doing after hours. So there's where we are. I mentioned a couple names here. Arista Networks, very impressive to see something like this and to see a hold. The name out to new highs, so really positive. Reminds me a little bit about the Deckers move. Notice what Deckers has been doing the last couple of days, right? So I talked about this too at the end of the day, but just rehashing here, right? This is really important when a name does this. Why is this important, right? Well, there's a few reasons, but I mean, it broke through new highs, but look at the price action since earnings, right? Why is it still going up? Well, it's because institutions who were not in the stock are now buying it, right? Because they said something really positive, they had good results, and the stock wants to go higher here. So that's your third day now of, breaking higher like this. So it will probably at this point, I would think, consolidate a little bit, but that's why earnings movers, and that's why we put together an earnings list every quarter as names are coming out, and we update that as we go along, because a lot of times this is what's going to these set up as really good trading setups for the next quarter, because you could see the institutions were not all in this name, right? They were not, otherwise this would have probably saw some profit taking, but the stock from where it closed the other day at 576 is up another $22 from there. All right, so Arista Networks will definitely be, keeping an eye on. I do not have a position currently in it, but very strong looking. AMD after the close today. I hate to say it because I know people get mad at me when I do this, but AMD has not been a strong performer in the semiconductors, right? And you could look at this. Oops. And what's really nice to do is to compare the you could compare the stock versus its overall group. What we're looking at here is a 5-year chart of AMD versus SMH. So I did not play this name after the close. It's not a very consistent name after earnings. It has went down 6 of the last 10 quarters. So that it didn't have that going for it either. Now I know that there was some call buying in it, but call buying, in my opinion, really doesn't mean that much. A lot of times it's speculative. A lot of times you don't know what the position, you don't know if they're holding a short position and they're buying calls to kind of hedge some of that, or they may be substituting out of their stock position and going into calls. There's a whole bunch of different reasons, but Regardless, this has been a name that really hasn't been performing or outperforming its group, right? And you could see specifically this year, right? The last few months, it's been underperforming, right? Now you may ask yourself, right? Well, what are the names that are outperforming? Well, of course, let's look at NVIDIA first, because that actually had some great outperformance. And I think that, if as long as you've been trading this year, that story. So here's NVIDIA AMD, right? This is just 1 year. Here's 5 years. Right, so really a nice outperformer. Now it's been kind of stalling a little bit, right? The last couple months, it has not been outperforming the group once it kind of peaked out here back at the end of August. For the last 3 months, right? It is 2.5 months, right? It has been actually underperforming a little bit. Again, super short-term stuff. Over the last 5 years, it's been a heavy outperformer. Now, here's another name. Nobody talks about this name. Right, I get it. It's a higher price stock. It's a little bit harder to trade, but this is where's the Synopsys, right? Look at what Synopsys has been doing the last the last 4 or 5 months. Heavy outperformance. So would you so ask yourself, would you rather be in an AMD, right? Or at a Synopsys? I would say there's a much better argument for Synopsys. I don't really care that it doesn't see option activity, or that FinTwit doesn't really care about it. That FinTwit is often wrong about things. The most popular stocks on FinTwit are also many times your underperformers. But look at what the stock has done the last 3 or 4 months, right? And look at what the chart. So again, that's the relationship chart, one over the other, and it's important to look at these things in isolation. But here you go. Right? Look at the chart. Now, again, we can look at these side by side, but here's what SMH has been doing. Right? Again, it kind of looks like AMD, right? Making a series of lower highs in a channel. We could probably at this point draw one of these, but this is not great performance to look at in the short term. Look at what Synopsys is doing. It's going the other way. Whoops, whoa. Sorry about that. User error, but very strong and outperforming today, up 1.8%. All right, so in any event, it's very important to pay attention to relative strength within a group, and of course, what it's doing, on its own as well. All right, a couple names that I thought were interesting for the day. CrowdStrike, right? This is the cyber group got hot a couple weeks ago and then cooled, right? But it held in there quite well. And I actually added this to the TTG trend portfolio. It didn't have a monster day today, but up 1.2% and holding where it needs to. I think it looks really good here. All right. A few other names that I was looking at for the day. Another name that had good earnings, this will go on our earnings list, VRNS, which I believe is also a cyber name as well. Cyber software name, had a good quarter. It's something to keep an eye on. This is a $33 stock, right? Not very popular, but the chart looks pretty good here, right? And I noted this name a couple weeks ago. It had a real nice break above the value area and chilled out a little bit and gave a nice opportunity for earnings as the price was right down into there. All right, Home Depot and Lowe's, right? I was going through some charts last night and just realized I've been looking at this Home Depot chart for like the last week or two, but just noticed how beaten up this is, right? I think changing styles a little bit. If this market continues to be what it's been doing over the last few months, is very much short-term swing trades have worked. In the past month, scalping has worked more than anything else. Swing trading has not really worked because the amount of names that look like they were breaking out got rejected, right? But now this is a market for like edges, right? Meaning like once it starts to turn, maybe it can run up a little bit, but you can't overstate your welcome in names that are in downtrends. The same thing happened with Lowe's. I was really surprised at what the the PE ratio in Lowe's. It's like a 12 or 13, right? It's not an expensive company. Again, you kind of have to wait for the turn first, but I'm in some of this. This is the one that I chose to go with. I just kind of saw the writing on the wall as Trex reported, and even though they kind of gave back a lot of their early gains, they were still up 1.6%. Another name that's been in a channel, downward channel for a while. And if you go through this group, Floor and Decor had a good name. So again, a good day. So again, I'm not saying that the trend changes here. I'm just saying that, hey, there are some of these things that you could play for short-term quick bounces. Last group I'll talk about was what happened in what's been going on here in nat gas. I've been in this. I've been playing this commodity the last couple of weeks. I played it on the breakout here. I took profits here. That worked pretty well. And then I had a quick trade in this last week. I didn't stay in the trade very long. I made just small money. And because I noticed that maybe I didn't see it originally, but there was a version point of control. And once we took this out, we stalled and I took off the trade in here. But notice what it's doing. It's kind of returning back here. Right now, you could either decide to play this through futures. That's the best way. UNG is a horrible instrument because it's has the futures role that you have to worry about. But if you look through some of these names that are more levered to the nat gas commodity, this Range Resources making a nice little move here. The only problem with this is you have to get through the resistance at 37.60, right? And then the other name too, which I really like, which already had earnings, which is Antero Resources. Now, again, this hasn't officially triggered. You haven't missed anything yet here, right? What I would be looking for is a bigger move than just like, up 3%, which is nice today. But really, if this breaks resistance 29.79. Last group that I'll talk about is Biotech. I thought Biotech, again, this is a group that's one of your most beaten up areas, right? But it does have some support in here, right? You could trade anything as long as you've got some support and you know where to get out of it. If you were looking for a further bounce here in Biotech, set your stop to the low, right? Use the low of today, but nice reversal. Right, this was actually your best performing group today since the open. So it really shook off the Sarepta news. Bad news for anybody who, of course, has this disease. Bad news, because they did not meet their this drug study that happened. But I'll tell you, and also bad news for anybody who had the stock. And I'm going to tell you something in this video that nobody tells you on Twitter or X, is that option activity is really nice because people do a lot of victory laps around the stuff, but it's usually 50-50 whether or not these trades work when you see bullish option activity or bearish option activity, calls that were bought, puts that were bought. There's a 50-50 chance that this stuff works, right? I don't see anybody tweeting about this. A couple of weeks ago, everybody talking about, oh, they bought calls, they did multiple times. They bought call spreads in this thing. Right? Sometimes it just doesn't work, right? And they don't know anything. There is every once in a very small time frame, and that's what attracts people to option flow, is sometimes somebody does know. And they usually do know when there's a deal. Somebody usually knows something's going on, right? And you'll see calls bought a couple days before and it works. But more often, these are the results that you get. Now, I was caught in this position too. I didn't have a huge position, but I had some stock in this thing. And it's not fun when this happens, but I try to bring up these examples on both when option activity doesn't work versus when it does work, because it's a trap for new traders who think, oh my God, there was calls bought. They have to know, right? They don't know. They're using a lot of times options for speculative reasons, right? And when you think about it, right, the better action occurs in stocks, right? If somebody's really confident about, a name, right, they're going to own stock in it, right? Options, you can only lose the premium, right? So it's much more speculative. So if you want to take a shot, right, you do it with, a shot where you're worried about the risk. You do it with options, right? You don't necessarily do it with stocks. So in any event, I try to bring this stuff for you so that you can be aware, because there are a ton of swindlers out there on X instead of Twitter, I'll say, nowadays, who will only tweet the winners, right? And they'll only do these victory laps when, and they'll go back and they'll look months back, right? Oh yeah, I wrote up about this, right? These are the masters of disguise. You want to be careful of these people who are doing it, because they're not being truthful with you. All right, guys, that is it for today. Have a great Halloween, and have a great start to the new month.